Yo, what is going on, everyone? My name is Nick, or the Notorious Fantasy, and in today's video, we're going to be talking about 5 players that I can't stop drafting in 2024 fantasy football. We're going to be going in depth through each of these 5 players that I can't stop drafting, and I'm going to tell you guys why I think you guys need to be targeting these players in your 2024 fantasy football drafts. But before we could get into things, I would like to ask that if you guys are new to the channel and you do end up enjoying today's video, that you hit that subscribe button down below while you're down there. Whether you are new to the channel or not, please make sure that you do leave a like on today's video. It would help me out a ton. If you want to follow me on Twitter or X, please do so at NotoriousFantasy. So without further ado, let's get into today's video. We begin with the first player that I can't stop drafting in 2024 fantasy football, and that is Justin Jefferson, wide receiver of the cold like Minnesota Vikings. Current aggregate ADP from Sleeper, ESPN, MFL, NFFC, and Fantrax have him as the wide receiver number 3 at pick 4. Underdog Fantasy ADP wide receiver 4 at pick 5.3. Now, based upon me doing a bunch of mock drafts as well as a bunch of best ball drafts on Underdog Fantasy, I have seen that there is a wide range inside of the first round where Justin Jefferson goes. There are some drafters that believe that Justin Jefferson is the number 1 wide receiver entering into this year. He's the best wide receiver in the NFL, and they pick him at pick number 2 right after Christian McCaffrey goes at the 101. There are also some drafters that are taking him at ADP around pick 4 or 5, and then there are some drafts where Amon-Ra St. Brown, Jamar Chase, Breece Hall, Bijan Robinson all go ahead of him, and he falls to pick 6, 7, or 8. So there is a wide range inside of the first round where Justin Jefferson goes, and that is because there are a lot of drafters that are afraid, they're petrified of drafting Justin Jefferson because of the quarterback situation in Minnesota. They are scared of either Sam Darnold or JJ McCarthy, and I believe, as we are sitting right now in the middle of July, that this is probably going to be a situation where maybe Sam Darnold plays a couple of games and then we end up seeing JJ McCarthy play the rest of the season out. Now, I understand that to many, the idea of mono man Sam Darnold or JJ McCarthy being Justin Jefferson's quarterback will make their ears bleed, right? They'll think of it and their brain starts to shut down. But once you look at last season and you put into context how last season went, you will fully understand and you will come to the conclusion that you should be drafting Justin Jefferson as an upper echelon wide receiver inside of the top 6 picks of fantasy football drafts this year. If you look at last season, he only played in 10 games due to injury, but he was the wide receiver 5 in PPR points per game. He had 100 targets in those 10 games, 10 per game, ranking 35th. 58 receptions, 5.8 per game, ranking 31st. 1,074 receiving yards, 107.4 per game, 19th. 5 total touchdowns, 29th at wide receiver. He ranked 4th in yards per route run, 6th in yards per target, and 13th in yards per reception, doing so with the 69th best target accuracy. Shout out to Borat. Very nice. I like. But obviously, while Borat might like the number 69, he put up those solid numbers in 10 fucking games with the 69th most accurate passes coming his way. So, if you look at the 5-game sample size where Justin Jefferson was playing and Cole's Cash Kirk Cousins wasn't playing due to his injury, you will see that in those 5 games, Justin Jefferson had 32 catches on 47 targets for 503 yards and 2 touchdowns. On average, that is 6.4 receptions per game, 9.4 targets per game, 100.6 receiving yards per game, and 0.4 receiving touchdowns per game. So, if you use that average that we are talking about there, and you create a 17-game sample size, you will get 108.8 receptions. You can round that up to 109. 159.8 targets, round that up to 160. 1,710.2 receiving yards, so 1,710, and 6.8 touchdowns, round that up to 7. 109 receptions, 160 targets, 1,710 receiving yards, and 7 total touchdowns. Now, I think Justin Jefferson can get more touchdowns than that. So, while Justin Jefferson didn't have Kirk Cousins last year, the guy would have been one of the best wide receivers in fantasy football using a 17-game sample size. And honestly, I think the quarterback play out of J.J. McCarthy and Sam Darnold will be better than what Justin Jefferson had once Kirk Cousins went down. The first game, Justin Jefferson comes back, 2 receptions, 3 targets, 27 yards, right? But then after that, 7 receptions on 10 targets for 84 yards, 6 receptions on 10 targets for 141 yards and a touchdown, 5 receptions on 10 targets for 59 yards, and 12 receptions on 14 targets for 192 yards and a touchdown. It doesn't matter if it's me, you, Sam Darnold, J.J. McCarthy, doesn't matter who the fuck it is. This guy, Justin Jefferson, is one of the best, if not the best wide receivers in the NFL. I understand people are going to get their panties in a bunch and get all nervous about drafting Justin Jefferson because of the quarterback situation. But based upon the stats that I just outlined, I drew it all out for you like Picasso. You need to be drafting Justin Jefferson, and I love him in the middle of the first round. Moving now to player number 2 that I can't stop drafting. That is Jaylen. Waddled away, waddle, till the very next day, bump, bada bum, of the Miami Dolphins. Aggregate ADP wide receiver 19 at pick 35. Underdog Fantasy ADP wide receiver 15 at pick 19.9. Now, if you really want Jaylen Waddle, you probably have to draft him in a lot of situations at the end of the second round. But based upon ADP, pick 35, you might be able to get him in the middle of the third round or potentially the end of the third round if fantasy drafters are concerned. And there is some reason to be concerned because last year, Jaylen Waddle sold your team up the river, right? If you drafted Jaylen Waddle at ADP, you got an Alaskan bullworm to the dome from Jaylen Waddle. Wide receiver 34 in PPR, 21 in PPR points per game, tied with former Alabama teammate Devontae Smith. 14 games played, 104 targets, 7.4 per game, 31st at wide receiver, 72 receptions, 5.1 per game, 26th, 1,014 receiving yards, 72.4 per game, 25th, 4 total touchdowns, 43rd. Though he ranked 9th in expected points added, 13th in target separation, so Jaylen Waddle was able to get open. 2nd in route win rate to further solidify that, and 14th in fantasy points per route. So I believe Jaylen Waddle will not score as bad as he did last season, and he will be a very reliable wide receiver too, with the upside of having those top 12, top 10, maybe even top 5 games due to how explosive the Miami Dolphins offense is. The Dolphins offense has the upside to be the best offense in the NFL. They are going to be dropping bombs game in and game out, and they are a team that has the upside to score 50-plus points in any given game. Jaylen Waddle, I understand, was a big failure last year, right? You didn't get the 5 booms, Big AJ and Big Justice style. Shout out to the Costco guys, right? Instead, you got a big fat bust in your face like your name was Mia Malkova. Now, I guess technically he wasn't the craziest bust ever, right? Because he didn't finish as like the wide receiver 57 or something. But wide receiver 34, based upon where you drafted him, was definitely a letdown. Now, if something was to happen to Tyreek Hill, knock on wood, we don't root for injuries as a Dolphins fan, that would make me cry. But if something was to happen to Tyreek Hill, Jaylen Waddle could end up being a reliable top 12 wide receiver every single week with Tyreek gone. Now, if you look at Jaylen Waddle's prior 2 seasons, so prior to last year, 115 plus targets in both seasons, 75 plus receptions in both seasons, 1,000 plus receiving yards in both those seasons, and 6 plus touchdowns. So, those past 2 seasons, one of those with Tyreek, he averaged more targets, more receptions, and more touchdowns. So, what is more likely to happen? That Jaylen Waddle magically fell off the edge of the earth, that Jaylen Waddle lost a step as a young man, right? It's not like Jaylen Waddle is fucking ancient, right? It's not like he was chilling with King Tut back in his tomb back in the day, right? In Egypt. No, Jaylen Waddle is very young. And I think that while Jaylen Waddle had a down year last season, it is very likely that a guy with the speed, with the skill, with the guy being able to get open so frequently, that he is going to bounce back in a huge way this season. I believe the Dolphins are going to be having defenses in the camel clutch, in the walls of fucking Jericho all season long. They're going to slip a ghillie, Dustin Poirier style, and I think that Jaylen Waddle has that top 12 upside in positive matchups, even in negative matchups, he could do it because he's so fucking fast. All it takes is a target 5 feet away from Tua. He jukes 3 guys out and he's straight to the crib. So Jaylen Waddle in Miami, I think he's in for a huge bounce back season. And if he's coming off the board as the wide receiver 19, that is just absolutely laughable. At number 3, we got another Dolphin. We're staying in Miami in the 305 Dale. Shout out to Raheem Mostert, running back of the Miami Dolphins. Aggregate ADP, running back 26 at pick 84. Underdog fantasy ADP, running back 28, pick 94.7. Now, some people in the comments will be like, Nick, you only like Raheem Mostert and these Dolphins guys because you're biased. You're a Dolphins fan. Well, if you guys were watching when I started making videos around 2019 or 2018, one of those years, when the Dolphins were bad, when I projected the Dolphins players to be bad, I would tell you, hey, these guys aren't good. They're not going to do anything for you. Don't draft them. But once the Dolphins got Mike McDaniel, once things started to turn around, the paradigm shift in Miami, I started to bang my chest like Donkey Kong, bang my chest like King Kong on top of the Empire State Building and tell you guys that I like these players. Now, I don't like all Dolphins players. I'm not going to sit here and tell you to draft Odell Beckham Jr. with your last pick. I'm not going to sit here and advocate for Malik Washington or something like that. But who I'm going to tell you about is the Dolphins players that are going to make an impact on your fantasy football team. And if you drafted Raheem Mostert last season, like I told you to, I also told you to draft Devin A-Chain last season. He was the running back 4 in PPR points per game, Mostert. Running back 5 in PPR. He played in 15 games. He ranked 2nd in carries, right? Only 209, or not 2nd, 20th in carries. 209 carries, 13.9 per game. Only 13.9 carries per game. He had over 1,000 rushing yards, 67.5 per game, 10th. He had 32 targets, 25 receptions, 175 receiving yards, and 21 total touchdowns, first at running back. Now, I understand that we all love to give the Sukalamink special, the Gawk Gawk 9000, to Devin A-Chain. And I love Devin A-Chain, right? But there is a very good chance that while Devin A-Chain could easily take over, Raheem Mostert isn't going anywhere. We ain't going nowhere. We can't be stopped now because it's bad boys for life, right? Raheem Mostert ain't going nowhere. Sure, they might sprinkle his touches away slightly, but there's still a good chance that he could fuck around and score 12, 14, 15 touchdowns due to how good the Dolphins offense is. 11th in true yards per carry, so he doesn't need 8,000 carries every single game to be successful. 7th in juke rate, 6th in breakaway run rate, right? He could bust off a run that you thought was going to be locked up, right? He shout out Akon. He does a 360 no scope like he's on top of rust, runs past someone, and he's directly gone 70 yards. 10th in evaded tackles, 8th dominator rating. While we could all be huge fans of Devin A-Chain, and I am, at ADP as the running back 26, like, there is a non-zero chance that Raheem Mostert ends up being the lead back again in Miami. So, the upside here is extravagant. The safety here is pretty high, right? Normally at running back 26, you're not getting a running back that you feel very confident in, right? You're kind of just taking that deep shot, Stephen Curry meme shooting from the moon, right? That's what you normally have to do. But here with Raheem Mostert, he feels a lot safer, and he still has that huge upside. Again, the guy was the running back 4 in PPR points per game last season. I get that Raheem Mostert on paper isn't the prototypical healthy guy. This is kind of a guy that in the past, before Miami, would go take a shower before the game, slip, drop the soap, someone ends up in the shower with him, lock in a sock to the dome, and he's out for the season, right? But in Miami, that hasn't really been the case. And I'm not just going to sit here and tell you he is going to get hurt. So in a Miami Dolphins offense that I project, you all should project to be very good yet again in 2024, why not take that shot on Raheem Mostert as the running back 26 off the board, aggregate ADP, running back 28 off the board on Underdog Fantasy. At number 4, we got DeAndre Hopkins. Now we're keeping it a little bit old school here, right? We got Raheem Mostert, pretty old running back, and DeAndre Hopkins, that's a dude that was truly chilling with King Tut himself. He was cutting down trees with George Washington, right? Wide receiver of the Tennessee, the Le Titans. Aggregate ADP, wide receiver 42 at pick 90. Underdog Fantasy, wide receiver 40 at pick 76 or 67.2. I guess I have dyslexia or something. But DeAndre Hopkins. In a vacuum, him versus Calvin Ridley, right? They're on the same offense, but for this analogy, they're going toe-to-toe. Israel Adesanya versus Alex Poatan Pereira, right? We got the red guy versus the blue guy in Rock'em Sock'em Robots. We got Rocky versus Apollo Creed, right? We got Creed from the Creed movies up against the Russian guys, Ivan Drogo, if he dies, son, right? We've got two guys duking it out here. If I had to tell you who do I prefer in a vacuum, right? They're both getting picked at the same pick. I would probably lean with Calvin Ridley. But, and this is a huge but, right? Shout out to, we're going to give a shout out to today. Huge but. Leave some comments, like who should we be shouting out? Normally I shout out Mia Malkova, Violet Myers, Kim Kardashian. We're kind of shouting out the same people all the time. Shout out Jen Selter. That's an old school. That's some old school stuff. If you guys if you're not a real jerker like me, you know, you would never know who Jen Selter was. That was just a joke, obviously. Joke, okay? But DeAndre Hopkins, right? I would personally lean in a vacuum if toe-to-toe, the same pick, I'd take Calvin Ridley. But there was a lot wrong with Calvin Ridley last year, right? There was a lot of fucking drops that shouldn't be dropped. There was a lot of bad with Calvin Ridley. DeAndre Hopkins, I get, didn't have a huge season. Wide receiver 22 in PPR, 30 in PPR points per game. 17 games played, 136 targets, 8 per game, 14th. 75 receptions, 24th at wide receiver, 4.4 per game. 1,057 receiving yards, 21st at wide receiver, 66.2 per game. And 7 total touchdowns, 18th at wide receiver. But when you try to actually whip the microscope out, right? You try to put things into context, kind of like we did with Justin Jefferson up with the number 1 guy that I can't stop drafting. You will have an epiphany. All right? 9 games played with Will Levis. 8, shout Mike Tyson, 8 games played without Will Levis. Okay? 9 games. 15.27 PPR points per game. Out of split, just 10.78 with the other quarterbacks. 4.33 receptions per game. With Will Levis, without Will Levis, 4.5. So technically, you get more receptions, but every other number just points towards everything being significantly better with Will Levis. 8.56 targets per game with Will, 7.62 without, 68.33 receiving yards with Will, 55.25 without, and this is the most damning number, 0.67 per game. In terms of touchdowns, with Levis, 0.12 without, right? If Will Levis played, or if DeAndre Hopkins played the whole season without Will Levis, this poor fucker would have barely even found the end zone, right? He wouldn't be able to find it. He would have needed a map, okay? So while they have added on Calvin Ridley, I understand And I've said I understand like multiple times in this video, so people are going to be mad. Like, Nick, stop saying I understand. So I get that Will Levis isn't the best quarterback in the NFL, but we saw some flashes, some sparks last season. Now, those flashes weren't like, holy shit, this is the next Aaron Rodgers, this is the next Brett Favre, this is the next Holmes, Brady, whatever, right? I didn't see that. What I saw is a guy that can sling the rock and a guy that might be better than the narrative on him, right? He kind of has a lot of unknown. But what is a known of Will Levis? It is known that he throws the ball a bunch to DeAndre Hopkins. Again, I get that Calvin Ridley is there, and maybe the targets go down slightly, but I don't even think they will. So I think DeAndre Hopkins is a pretty safe bet this season as the wide receiver 42 to greatly outscore that. This is a guy that could be a very reliable wide receiver 3 or flex option at ADP. But the upside, if Will Levis is smashing, right? If Will Levis really turns things up, right? He has that first season in Tennessee, right? He only plays 9 games. He's okay, right? He just turns it up a little bit and he plays a little bit better. Then the upside of DeAndre Hopkins is very high. And again, while DeAndre Hopkins is getting old, right? He needs that fucking walker. He needs a pimp cane, right? Second in dominator rating, 18th in yards per route run, and 19th in fantasy points per route run. So again, the guy still has it. He might be ancient, right? He might have been walking on earth with the dinosaurs, but I still think that DeAndre Hopkins got it at his age. And I think at ADP, he's a guy that I'm looking to target a lot more. I only really got turned on, to DeAndre Hopkins recently. Prior to, I'd say like about a week ago, I wanted nothing to do with DeAndre Hopkins. Final guy to discuss here is Luke Musgrave, tight end of the Green Bay Packers. Aggregate ADP tight end 17 at pick 133. Underdog fantasy ADP tight end 17, pick 148.9. Speaking of Underdog Fantasy, they are the sponsor of today's video. If you guys are new to Underdog Fantasy and click on the link in the video description or use promo code Notorious, you'll receive a special pick plus up to $250 if you're a first-time depositor. Underdog Fantasy is the best way to do fantasy football best ball drafts this summer. And my favorite part about best ball is that it's my favorite part about fantasy football. It's the draft. Once you do the draft, that's it. Underdog Fantasy will put your highest scores into your lineup every single week. There's no trades, no waivers, no in-season management. Underdog Fantasy offers a bunch of tournaments from a variety of entry fees, right? Entry fees as low as $3, some of the tournaments up to $1,000 entry fee, right? Their main tournament, Best Ball Mania 5, buy-in $25, first place $1.5 million. So if I don't win the $1.5 million, you want to know who I hope wins it? One of you guys. So if you're new to Underdog Fantasy, you want to get drafted, and I do live drafts on there all of the time, make sure that you check out Underdog Fantasy, promo code Notorious, or by clicking on the link in the video description. If you have a gambling problem, make sure you call 1-800-GAMBLER. At number 5, Luke Musgrave. Now, Luke Musgrave, to me, is one of the best punt tight ends, right? If you don't get your guy early, right? You get sniped on Travis Kelce. You miss out on Trey McBride, Kyle Pitts, Sam Laporta, Dalton Kincaid, Mark Andrews, right? You miss out on those early guys. And then after those guys go, people start taking backup tight ends, and you are feeling like you're getting buried, right? You are just getting covered in dirt, and your head is barely popping out, right? You're putting your mouth and nostrils out of there trying to breathe, right? And then you're going to be able to get out. And how are you going to get out? By drafting Luke fucking Musgrave. And you want to know why I like Musgrave? Because on paper, coming out of college, this guy's workout metrics would have you salivating, right? Rookie last year, 89th percentile 40-yard dash, 94th percentile speed score, 87th percentile burst score, 84th percentile catch radius. And he ranked in terms of efficiency, 11th in yards per target, 19th in yards per reception, and first in target separation. So this guy was able to get open very frequently. He was the tight end 25 in PPR points per game last year, tight end 30, but he did have those solid spots. 11 games played with 9 starts. Now, Musgrave began the season as the starter over Tucker Kraft mac and cheese, but he suffered a lacerated kidney, which just sounds terrible. The word lacerated just sounds like it hurts really bad. I've never suffered a lacerated kidney. I pray to the good Lord above, to the to the 7 gods. Shout out to Game of Thrones, to all the gods, basically. That never happens to me because, again, it just sounds terrible. He missed 6 games with that. That injury was suffered in week number 11. So he was the starter ahead of Tucker Kraft. And he gets hurt. Tucker Kraft plays decently. So I'm not saying that Luke Musgrave is way better than Tucker Kraft, but Tucker Kraft will be out of football activities until August/September due to rehabbing from a pectoral pec repair surgery. So, Musgrave will be the tight end number 1 on the team. Could he lose his job? He could. But starting off the season, he will be the number 1 tight end on the Green Bay Packers. Now, entering into last season, if you said, Nick, I can get the tight end 1 on Jordan Love's Packers, I would have told you to get fucked right where you breathe, right? I would tell you that. Who cares? Who gives a singular shit, right? Who cares? Then I saw the Packers last year. Then I saw Luke Musgrave last year. And I said, wow, Owen Wilson style. Okay. Now I need to draft guys on the Packers because Jordan, love me tender, love me sweet, was surgical out there. He was dominating those defenses. He was making them tap. They were screaming uncle. They could have beat the 49ers in the playoffs. That's how good they're playing. 49ers are great. Packers are great. They are one of the best teams in the NFC, and I wouldn't be shocked at all if they were in the Super Bowl year number 2 of Jordan Love. Now, again, Nick, Jordan Love's been in the NFL for way longer than that. Look, I know he played a couple of games for Aaron Rodgers, but it wasn't like he played 7 games in a row or something. Last year was our first, basically the rookie year of Jordan Love, and he popped off. He was amazing, and Luke Musgrave looked good to me. Again, I get the stats aren't amazing. 46 targets, 34 receptions, 352 receiving yards, and 1 total touchdown. He was a guy that last year, you watch the games, you're like, this guy's eventually going to break out. I think his sophomore year, year number 2, with Jordan Love Me Tender, Love Me Sweet with Matt LaFleur, I think that Luke Musgrave is going to be worth that tight end dart throw. And the best part about loving one of these late round tight ends, you want to know who we loved last year? Sam Laporta. But what I will tell you, that if you miss, right, if Luke Musgrave, the first game, is like invisible, right, he's doing the John Cena, he can't see me, he's like a Casper the Ghost, and then game 2 comes, it's like, okay, I'll give you your 1 miss. I'm going to miss, right? Strike 1. Then he misses in week 2, right? Strike 2. Maybe I don't even give him 3 strikes. You're out, right? Just 2 strikes. Get the fuck out of here. Here's the door, buddy. Cut him right off your team. So there's really no risk in it because he's going so late. So if he ends up being a miss, you're not going to be sitting there like, Nick, you told me to draft Luke Musgrave. That's why I lost my league. Like, if you lost your league because pick number 133 went tits up for you, that's really, that doesn't really mean much, right? As you get later into the draft, those guys are much more expendable, okay? So Luke Musgrave, I like him a lot, right? I'm ready to attach my name to Luke Musgrave. I'm ready to keep drafting him a lot more on Underdog Fantasy. But again, if that guy bends you over the table without the use of lube here, it's not going to hurt you too bad. So Luke Musgrave is my final player I can't stop drafting. So we got Justin Jefferson, Jaylen, waddled away, waddle, till the very next day. Raheem Mostert, DeAndre Hopkins, and Luke Musgrave as the 5 players that I can't stop drafting in 2024 fantasy football right now. If you did end up enjoying today's video, please make sure that you smash that subscribe button like it owes you money. Make sure you guys hit that like button down below, whether you are new to the channel or not. Check out one of the videos on your screen. If you haven't seen them already, put that shit on. Shout out Antonio Brown. I love you guys all so much. Hope you have a great one. And as always, good boy.